PC building, a glorious art, the PC master race.
All of these things that describe building your own PC makes it sound unobtainable to the average Joe.
But this couldn't be further from the truth. PC building has no limits, whether those limits be age or budget.
Hey everyone, I'm Anish,
And I'm Tejas,
and we're the PC Builders.
and this is the PC Master Race podcast.
We both have built our own PC, including the ones we're using right now.
And we've created this podcast so we can help you build your next PC.
Briefly, PC building is the act of buying multiple parts and assembling them together to make a fully functional computer.
But first, a message from our sponsor.
Introducing Intel Arc. Take your PC gaming to the next level with our next-gen graphics cards. Experience real-time ray tracing and state-of-the-art XeSS upscaling technology. Buy Intel Arc today.
Now let us tell you what PC building is.
PC building is kind of like putting together Legos. It's not as complicated as you think, and everything just clicks together.
PC building is the act of buying multiple computer components and assembling them together to build your own PC.
And yeah, that's all PC building is.
You might be thinking, why should I build my own PC?
Well, there are countless reasons. The first reason you should build it is because of how easy it is to fix your computer and troubleshoot it.
If your computer stops working, you'll have much more awareness on what part would be malfunctioning and you could fix it much easier.
This is unlike a laptop where you don't know what's malfunctioning, you have to send it to a repairist, and you might have to throw out the whole laptop because of one small issue. The second reason you should build your own PC is that anyone could do it. There's no age restrictions.
8-year-olds with zero experience have built PCs only using a YouTube video, and 80-year-old grandmas could have been veteran PC builders.
Building a computer could have numerous use cases. Building PCs can be used for professional use, personal use, or even both. Some common reasons for building computers are gaming, video editing, photography, photo editing, programming, web surfing, AI, and much, much, much more.
Another positive aspect of building your own computer is the customizability. If you want to build your own computer, you could pick whatever parts you want, and your computer will be one of a kind. And you'll have the satisfaction knowing that the PC you're using is one you built with your own hands.
Additionally, building a computer can be much more cost effective than picking up a laptop at Costco or a pre-built from Amazon.
This is because there is zero additional cost for assembly of the parts. There are also no underpowered or throttled laptop parts, meaning you get what you pay for, unlike laptops.
Okay, now let's move on from that now that you know what PC building is and why people build computers. Now we can tell you all about the different PC components and their uses and how they work.
Yay!
I'll start. There are about 7 to 8 base PC components in every PC build, but there could be more. So first up is the CPU. Um, it's kind of like the brain of your computer, and it stands for the Central Processing Unit, but it can also be referred to as the processor. It executes a lot of process on your computer and is arguably the most vital part of your PC. And it it's kind of dependent on many other parts, which we'll talk about later, which is like RAM and motherboard. And it and how it works, it has billions of transistors that turn on and off to do math, so like zeros and ones, and it creates logic gates with those. So it's basically just a glorified calculator that can do tasks really quickly on your computer.
The next and very vital part is the motherboard. It's like the nervous system or the spinal cord of your computer. It holds all the parts together. Its main purpose is to allow every single part to communicate between each other and transfer data between each other. This is usually where you plug in all your cables such as power cables, USB cables, audio cables, Wi-Fi, the power button, etc. It's very important, and it allows the CPU to transfer data between all the other parts, and it allows it to do its job as effectively as possible. The data is transferred using traces on the motherboard, and this is known as a printed circuit board, which we'll likely talk about later.
The next component is the RAM. It's kind of similar to our short-term memory. It stands for random access memory, and it comes in the form of long sticks. And it's it's closely related to your CPU as it's required to let your CPU do your work, as that's why it's situated really close to your CPU when your computer is built.
All right, so the next parts are the storage. These can come in two forms, an SSD or an HDD. An SSD stands for solid state drive, and an HDD stands for a hard disk drive. These are the long-term memory. They store all the programs that you want to use on your computer when they're unopened. It stores all the data you're not using, and it uses either zeros or 1 bit to store information in the SSD, or magnetic spinning disks if you choose to use an HDD.
The next up is a power supply or PSU. Its main job, by you can tell by its name, is to deliver power to all the other components in the computer. This is the part that connects into your wall. This, after it connects into your wall, it converts all the power flowing through your power supply into clean energy that transfers to all of your components in the form of DC power at a certain voltage. And it converts AC, which is alternating current, to DC power, as that's what's needed for almost all electronics in the world.
The next component is the GPU.
It's the graphics processing unit, and it gives a display output from your computer to your monitor or screen.
It's an extremely powerful component and is used for gaming, but is also usually purposed for other things such as mining for crypto or editing. It also slots right into the motherboard, so it's very easy to upgrade or switch between GPUs.
And it's very powerful and it uses many transistors like your CPU. And it has its own power cord instead of getting power straight from the motherboard like all the other parts.
It has everything included. Unlike the CPU, it has the processor. It has its own memory built in, and it has its own cooler built in, as well as a power supplier.
All cores on the GPUs work together in a few processes, unlike CPUs, which divide up all of their cores into different processes. GPUs also have many more cores than CPUs.
The next things we were going to talk about is a case and a CPU cooler.
Case is kind of like a big metal box that houses components. It protects your components from dust and static shock, and it can also have an aesthetic factor to it.
CPU cooler is responsible for keeping the CPU cool. CPUs can be very hot, over 105 degrees Celsius without the cooler. If they get too hot, they can slow down because the CPU will try and like stop handling as many processes so that their transistors don't create that much heat. The coolers also prevent damage from your CPU because your CPU can get very damaged if it keeps undergoing high temperatures for a long period of time.
Whew, that was a lot.
Sure was.
Let's take a short water break and we'll be right back.
Hello, and welcome back from the break. Now we'll talk about some acronyms and common terms from the PC building universe.
This is so you don't get confused when you hear these later. We will also tell you the use cases and what component or components the acronyms/terms are used for. Let's get started. So first is hertz and gigahertz, which is mostly related to your CPUs, but can sometimes be used when discussing GPUs. But just know when they're talking about gigahertz, 99.9% of the time it's about the CPU. So first, let's understand what a hertz is. Hertz is how many times the transistor can turn on or off in 1 second. So how many times it can be zero, it can switch from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0 in a single second. Modern processors can do this billions of times per second, hence gigahertz, which means billion hertz. It's not too important when looking at a CPU as long as the boost hertz or clock speeds are close enough to the modern counterparts.
Another term that you will be hearing is called megatransfers a second. It's also written as capital MT a second. This refers to speed of a RAM. It means how many data transfers a RAM stick can do per second. Modern RAM sticks can do millions of transfers of data per second, and it determines how fast your RAM will be able to respond with the CPU and work with the CPU. Another term you'll be hearing is VRAM. It's just RAM, but for graphics card. It stands for Video Random Access Memory. It's used for storing applications that the GPU is currently using. And usually, if you get more VRAM, you should because it's not upgradable like the RAM on your motherboard. It comes pre installed with this GPU, so you don't need to worry about getting any sticks or anything like that.
Next up you might hear is BIOS and CMOS. BIOS stands for Basic Input and Output System, and it's built into the motherboard as a software screen. And it's not an operating system like Windows and Linux. It's commonly referred to the software when booting up a PC, when first booting up a PC, before installing an operating system. And it's commonly used to overclock and make sure all of your settings and temps are doing just fine on your computer right after you've built it. And it's commonly accessible uh, when you're starting up your computer by spamming down a key when you're booting up, and you will have to check which key that is through the motherboard menu. CMOS is just referring to the battery on your motherboard, which can sometimes be used when troubleshooting your computer. Next up is cache. Cache is kind of another place to store data. It's kind of like RAM, but it's much, much, much faster. It's built directly inside chips during manufacturing. So your GPU and CPU both have built-in cache. It stores a very small amount of data, and I mean very small, but it's really, really fast, and it stores small amounts of data that the GPU and CPUs need um, very quickly and ones that they use very frequently. And there's also different levels of cache, which we'll explain in the second episode.
The next term you will be hearing is LAN and VRM. LAN stands for Local Access Network, and it's basically a version of the internet except within a certain space, and it's wired. VRMs are voltage regulator modules. They're usually found on motherboards and GPUs, and they control how much power or voltage can flow through certain parts of the motherboard or GPU.
Well, hopefully we explained all of those terms well enough that you guys can understand. But in case we didn't, we'll leave a couple videos down in the description. And we'll
Yup,
talk about it at a later date.
yup. And now we could take a short break. Phew, that was a lot of information in just one episode.
Well, it was worth it, as our valuable viewers now can understand and start their journey on becoming part of the PC Master Race.
And don't worry, this was likely our most boring episode, but we need you guys to really understand the topic before we can dive right in.
Yeah, and our next two episodes will be much more exciting and engaging, as you can follow along with us uh, as the activities and things we're describing during the podcast.
Make sure you remember all the parts. Knowing and understanding the different parts are crucial for being a good PC builder, and it will help you understand the topics in the next episodes.
Now for some fun facts. Did you know that a PC build can range anywhere from $40 all the way up to $100,000?
Whoa! I didn't know that it could be so cheap and so expensive. Also, did you know that you can build over an octillion different PC builds? That's one followed by 27 zeros. That's more PC builds than stars in the observable universe.
Oh wow, that's a lot of PC builds. Unfortunately, those are all the fun facts we have.
Make sure to be on the lookout for our next episode. In the next two episodes, we will teach you how to pick your own PC parts for your build and how to assemble them all together.
All resources used for research and will be listed in the description, and things that we mentioned earlier.
Thanks for tuning in today.
Make sure to catch tomorrow's episode on how to pick out what parts to buy for your own PC build.